side. So she will be sitting in on these meetings. She and Emily are already working together. She's also greatly involved in the transfer issues.
Glad to be joining you.
Good morning, Darlene. Good to see you again. And now in this new role, when you mention that special word transfer, I'm sure that lights everybody up in a good way. Thank you. Any other introductions? Okay, let's move on to the approval of the minutes. Do I hear a motion?
So moved, but I have a question afterwards.
A second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, Joe, go ahead, please.
I just wonder, we talked about Dr. Dow sending out the calendar to the segment soon. Somehow that slipped by me. Could you send that out again so that I will be ready for it this time?
Absolutely, no problem. I do know that Zakia, Dr. Lee, has been on top of it, so I know she's been paying attention to it, but I'm happy. I'll forward it to you as soon as this meeting's over.
Thank you. She's always paying attention to it, but she's doing the job of 3 people right now. So I know you are too, Emily, but if you could send it back out, I'd really appreciate it.
Absolutely, no problem. Happy
Thank
to.
You.
Great. Well, I want to take the chairman's privilege and make a couple comments. I think, as all of you know, that we are in the process of hiring the academic review team, enlarging that group up to 10 additional people. It's going to take a couple months, but it's already started with a few hires, so it's going very well. And also, you saw Al Dorset just a second ago. I think he may have turned his camera off. He has joined us, replacing Donna Thomas. Al brings 20 years experience, most recently as director of student financial assistance at Delaware State University. So he's had a number of really key roles, including some medical field work. So this is a tremendous addition to our team, and that OSFA, as you know, handles a tremendous amount of contacts from your institutions. So with that, why don't we move forward with the updates on the academic regulations?
Absolutely. So I have 3 of the next items, and most of these are just updates for the purposes of sharing with the group. A lot of these I think you already know, but just to make sure we're in a kind of formal setting to provide these updates. So I'm going to go topic by topic. If you have questions, let me know. Transfer, many of you have been participating in those discussions around the revised regulations and the guidance. We are close to getting the guidance out the door. Many thanks to those of you that provided feedback on the draft that went out a few weeks ago. And we do think that that guidance will be really, really useful in getting the campuses up and going on that front. And then, of course, as I've mentioned in those meetings, we do need to make an additional regulatory revision, and we're hoping that we put that back before the work group before the end of October, so that those can go before the commission at the October commission meeting. So transfer is well on its way, making progress, and excited to see how we kind of roll that all out. Any questions, comments, concerns on transfer? Yes, Joe.
I'd just like to say in this forum, and especially to the secretary, that Emily has been leading some really rich discussions. And I think that all of us understand both the importance and the urgency here, but we also are getting not pushback, but concern about the complexity of the processes that have to be developed. It's not that we're not committed to developing those processes, but we appreciate any flexibility and working with us that MHEC can do. We certainly have this goal of smooth transfer foremost and in front, but we appreciate MHEC working with us to attain that goal as smoothly and quickly as we can.
Okay, good. Well, keep those ideas coming in terms of what needs to be relooked at or looked at in terms of some flexibility. And we'll certainly work with you on that in terms of regulatory writing and capabilities. Okay, any other questions on the transfer?
I'll just second what Joe just said about
thoughtful process for transforming regulations on transfer with the mindset of helping students transfer seamlessly and all credits counting if they meet those benchmarks that you have in regs. And looking forward to continuing the work, because I know even for our institutions, it's a interesting build out. So, but I think we're all on the same page of helping students. And thanks, Emily, for your work on it.
Yeah. And
go ahead, Emily.
I appreciate the appreciation to me, but I definitely want to recognize Soma. She's been in the backdrop doing a lot of this work and really formulating kind of the system. So absolutely, thank you. I appreciate that.
And Brad, did you have your hand up?
I was hoping I could do a thumbs up in this form, but I can't.
Okay,
it's only
good.
hands up.
Okay, good. Yeah, they should put a new icon there for thumbs ups. Like, yeah, great. One of the things I'd remind each of us, if you think back to last year's session, legislative testimony on transfer, I think that some of the elected officials walked away believing that once this transfer was completed with regulations and once it was funded as it was, that everything transfers automatically, even internships from one thing to another. And I don't see that happening. I don't think that was ever the intention. So be aware of that, and we'll stand our ground on the regulations. And we may need your help on that if we start getting pushback from legislators. Joe?
To that end, should there be any meetings with individual legislators before the session to walk them through the complexities and what it is we're trying to do here? Would that be helpful before sitting at the table and getting spitballs thrown at us?
No, I think that's a very good idea. I think that we ought to look at some of the key sponsors of the legislation and those who had the key questions and offer to have that meeting and update. And we'll set that up. We'll work on that as soon as we get closer to regulations. Knowing we have elections too, we may have some new people that will have questions. Okay, Brad?
Sorry, I won't be like this the entire meeting, but Dr. Boffman, if we want to meet, we can talk too about what we're thinking about transfer. I didn't know if you were planning on asking the governor to place any more money in to fund the arts system like you were able to achieve last year, or just about how we're going to go about doing that. I know last year we tried to get a bill to go through, but it wasn't the year considering the increases we got. But just maybe we can follow up later.
Hey, Brad, I would just be remiss if I didn't mention that was a nice letter you sent to the governor talking about beautiful funding for community colleges, but it didn't mention the funding of transfer, nor the funding of the Promise Scholarship. So if you're drafting another one, those two would be good to get in there for the governor.
You're correct. You were correct.
All right. Okay, let's move along. Emily?
Yeah, thank you. More regulatory changes that are forthcoming is the academic credit for prior learning. As you all know, legislation was passed that requires institutions to accept AP credit, certain scores for AP credit and certain scores for CLEP, and this only applies to public institutions. I want to be clear that institutions need to have, per that law, and absent MHEC doing anything, institutions need to have policies in place by October 1. We will likely follow up with campuses in December to see where you are with those policies. So again, we can enter into legislative session with just some knowledge, even if it means, you know, you're waiting for your next board meeting to approve that policy. I think that's fine as long as you're making progress on that. The trick for us is, as per that legislation, there is an exemption that institutions can file for, essentially an exemption to the commission if they want to if they want to have a policy in place that requires a higher score than what is required in the legislation. So that is our challenge in the next month or so, is to figure out what that exemption process looks like, and we'll put that in regulation. As many of you know, we sent out a request for a work group. We have a work group formed. Our first meeting is on Friday. It will be a very brief introductory meeting, but I think we can be on track to have regulations before the end of the calendar year on this exemption process. So that's the goal of that work group, is to make sure we're all on the same page before we move forward in the formal regulatory process. President Wilson.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. So with regard to credit for prior learning, can you just kind of help me understand, Emily, what is it that the legislature is trying to achieve here? I've been kind of out of the loop on this, but we, of course, instituted, as you know, a series of academic degree programs here, where credit for prior learning is a centerpiece of those programs, and the board, of course, approved them. And so there were other institutions in the state that were already doing that. And so what is the legislation trying to achieve here?
Sure. So the bill is focused on 4 primary standardized exams. AP is the biggest one, CLEP, International Baccalaureate, and my goodness, I'm forgetting the 4th one, but they are standard exams that students. The law requires now campuses to accept a score of 3 on the AP exam across the board. All AP exams, that's the biggest chunk of all of this. I believe it sets a standard of 50, a score of 50 on the CLEP, and then it requires institutions to set policies for International Baccalaureate and Cambridge. Cambridge is the 4th one. So institutions can set scores, but it means that every public institution needs to accept, they need to award credit for those standardized exams and experiences. IB and Cambridge are a little bit more experiential. That's all to say that's the focus of the legislature. And again, the meat of it is really standardizing AP exams. Anyone who gets a 3 should automatically get credit. The challenge for institutions, and we won't get in the way of this, the challenge for institutions when you do your institutional policies, particularly on the AP credit, what credit are they getting? So if a student has done AP Bio, are they getting credit for Bio 101? What are they getting credit for? Your institutional policy should be very clear on that issue.
Okay, so just to be clear, this is really only about the standardized test that is targeted more toward existing high school students.
Absolutely.
Not about, CACL and the other
military. Yep. No.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions on credit for prior learning? President Wilson, I should also be clear though, because we have to create this exemption process. So if an institution wants to have a policy that they require a higher score on the AP exam, they can come to the commission, get an exemption to allow that requirement. We are going to make some regulatory changes to our credit for prior learning. The intent of those regulatory changes is to make it easier for campuses to have other credit for prior learning policies. The regulations we have, they're complicated. They need to be rewritten. So we are rewriting regulations to be just broader and allow institutions to have more flexibility and authority and jurisdiction over credit for prior learning policies on their campus, kind of taking us a little bit out of that role.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Yep. Brad? Sorry.
Oh, I was just curious, is the impetus behind all of this really the blueprint legislation for post-college and career readiness pathways? And they're wanting to make sure students are taking courses that are going to count towards college credit?
I can't speak for the legislature. I wouldn't be surprised if that's certainly the alignment. That is certainly our intent as well, is to expand opportunities, whether it's the CTE programming that's offered in high schools, other experiences that high school students, also expanding military experience, apprenticeship programs, all of those as part of this broader credit for prior learning. Yep. So updating all of that. Joe.
Joe, go ahead.
Thank you. Brad, the other thing is that the national organizations have been meeting with folks in Annapolis over the last 1.5 years or 2 years, pushing on, especially on the acceptance of all 3s. which in fact several of our campuses are pushing back on, especially in certain disciplines. So I think in part that it was an Annapolis response to national conversations.
Okay. Anything else on credit for prior learning? So again, we would like to have those regulations before legislative session starts so that we can keep that moving.
Let's move on, Emily. Yes.
Yep. Academic program review. Just a few updates for the good of the group. We are planning to do a fall training with campus leadership who do academic program proposals. We know that there's been a lot of turnover, so we're looking at a date for early November. We'll probably have that finalized by the end of the week. It'll probably be an all-day training session. We're not only going to go over academic program proposals, but we'll talk about the objection process and really get into some detail around duplication and the duplication analysis that we do at MHEC and the duplication analysis that we expect institutions to do as part of the program proposal process. So we'll do a little bit more than just what the proposal should include and open it up for discussion. So more to come on that front. I hope to have that finalized, like I said, by the end of this week. And we're looking at an early November. And the training would be in person. We're going to try to record it. We probably won't do a virtual complement. What we'll probably do is record it and then put it up on our website. So it will, if you're going to attend, you need to attend in person, but we'll try to record it so that the people who can attend in person will have access to it. Sarah.
Thanks, Emily. So
Sarah, you're muted.
Am I still muted? Okay. Did you want to talk more about academic program review? I was just trying to get in the queue. Is that all you wanted to talk about?
No. So let me finish my the whole to do here. So fall training, early November. We do want to remind campuses on implementation dates for program proposals. This is something that we've noticed and we are kind of getting on campuses about a little bit more in detail. We really can't have a proposal come to us July 15th with a fall implementation date. That's just, it's too close. There's too much room for error if the proposal is incomplete. That's just not. So we've been pushing back on campuses to say we need to revise the cover letter and say a spring or a winter fall implementation date. I say that out loud so that you're aware that that is a dynamic that happens actually far more often than it should. This isn't just an occasional proposal, but so if you can just reiterate that to campuses that they need to be realistic about when they're implementing program proposals and what they put on that cover sheet when they're sending it to us. We know that they're anxious by the time we're the last stop on their long journey of academic program planning, but we do need to give probably about a 2 or 3 month leeway there in terms of when they plan to implement. President Wilson. You are muted, sir.
Yeah, I think this is the only place perhaps where I can ask this question. But this has to do with the NCHEMS report, right? And I guess I can ask it here with regard to academic program review. And it's really only about process. So can you help me understand the process in terms of what is going to happen next? Because obviously, we have some major issues with that report. And so MHEC is not going to do anything with those recommendations, I assume, until something happens in the legislature. Is that correct?
So that is a good question. I will turn it over to Secretary Fielder on the NCHEMS report.
The NCHEMS report, Dr. Wilson, we reviewed it very carefully and analyzed some things and have raised a series of questions which were forwarded back to DLS at Vicki Gruber, and we've not had a response back other than to know that it's been forwarded on to NCHEMS. There were some, quite frankly, errors in terms of the interpretation of COMAR, where they stated things as in COMAR and that were not accurate. There are also some, what I would consider misperceptions that we've raised as potential issues. And once we get that straightened out, I would intend that MHEC moves forward with what we need to do. There's no reason to continue to wait on these things, because I think this is some recommendations. As an example, one of the recommendations about, having a 3-year cycle for academic program review and planning. And, there's some merit there. There's some other recommendations that have merit, but it needs to have thorough review by all of us. And I need to get the corrections understood where we are before I think we can move forward.
So, once again, with all due respect to the NCHIMS group, and I'm familiar with some of the people who were a part of that, that report is just not a serious report. And I want to get a sense of whether we should, I'm speaking in terms of Morgan, should be having direct conversation with the legislature, or is the expectation, because this was legislatively driven, that those recommendations now have come forward and MHEC is expected to go forward and implement them. That's what I'm kind of not understanding, or you're sensing that at the beginning of the legislative session that there's going to be a deep dive in the legislature around this report. It's hard for me to believe that the state of Maryland will go forward and implement something like that so drastically without a wider conversation.
No, I agree with you. There needs to be a wider conversation, and I need the conversation to include NCHIMS and the corrections that need to be made, and some of the misperceptions and statements fixed. When I say fixed, at least addressed, so we can understand the rationale behind some of the recommendations. So I think that, to say that it's legislatively driven, it was a DLS RFP, as you know, that was responded to, and so the recommendations are going into DLS. Mm-hmm. I have not had any, the direct verbal conversations with any legislators, and before I do, I'd like to try to get at least understanding of some of those recommendations from NCHIMS. So, but I'll be as transparent as I can be in terms of, the information.
Thank you.
Sarah?
I just wanted to add, which is something that I told the NICU presidents when they asked about this. Several of those, and Jennifer, I know Jennifer and Soma are on the call, but several of those recommendations can't be implemented without changes to statute. So there's only so much I think MHEC can do. But I think Dr. Wilson makes a good point about perhaps we could have a conversation in front of legislation getting introduced. What I told my presidents, which I'm a little nervous about, is it only takes one legislator to pick up that report and go to bill drafting and say, draft these. And so while I would like to believe that higher ed or DLS or there's some coordinated response, it's also possible that this gets in front of us. So take that as you may. That's just kind of what I advise my clients, and I thought it was worth repeating.
Well, yeah, I mean, is those that have read it, one of the glaring things for me is the assumption by NCHIMS in the statement that MHEC can just waive all the objection process or alter it all the way. Well, it's statutory. We can't do that statutory, and the report does not seem to make the difference or identify the difference between our regulations and statutory. That's a real issue for all of us. And so that's where the level of which the concern is.
Yeah, I think one legislator got it right. It was like the wild, wild west of Maryland higher education. And there needs to be very serious discussions about that. I just haven't been in any state. All of my career has been in public higher ed across 4 states. None of those states exist that way. If you will, you have to have some kind of regulation, and it has to be well understood. Otherwise, you'll have every single institution in every single state offering every single thing. And yeah, that's sort of what that report is saying, and it's hard for me to take it seriously.
No, I understand that, and I think the strength of Maryland's higher education is basically represented by the people on the screen. This segmental is unique, you know, that you meet and represent your institution, which is unique from the next sector, which is unique from, and that's so important that we preserve that and not have this, you know, homogeneous, you know, everybody have everything. It would be, one, would be difficult to fund. It would also be difficult to manage. So any other questions on NCHIMS, except that everybody's so happy about it, right? Once we get some, hopefully we get some questions answered, and then we can share those as once, I will share them once Vicki Gruber, she's the director of DLS, gives us a green light that we can do that. I don't want to step on those toes. Okay, Emily, let's move on then.
Sure.
Molly?
Oh yes, sorry, go ahead.
Before you leave program approval, and I feel like I should have gone before, but this is a minor thing, but I just wanted to ask you because I think everyone else can pay MHEC electronically except MICUA. Is that correct?
Yeah, so we have been working for over a year now on a credit card system. It has been, unfortunately, a very painful experience in terms of figuring out how, and it really is coming down to the logistics of getting what would live on our website to be able to pay by credit card. It's still an initiative that we're trying to tackle. It's just been way harder than, and we have engaged so many different entities to figure out how to do this for our agency.
Okay, so I don't know if maybe MICUA can help, but it continues to be a problem for us, and it's getting to be more and more of a problem. And it seems weird that it would be, but in an increasingly electronic age, and you know, with the new deadlines for submission, like we want to do what you're asking, but it makes it really difficult. So if you and I could talk maybe later this week, find out how other agencies are paid electronically, because to me, I hear you, but it doesn't seem that difficult. So I would love to try and help you help us. So thank you.
Yep, absolutely. I understand and know that it's like I said, it's been, if not weekly, at least twice a month, internal discussions of where we are and how we move it forward. So it's been, I feel comfortable saying it's been a very frustrating process for us.
And I would recommend that we bring in at least our budget administration director on this, because he may know of different ways the state can set up electronic transmissions.
Yeah, Jeff, I think the challenge has been not on that front, it's been on the IT front and working on the IT.
I'm saying there might be alternatives to credit card receiving credit cards.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we can certainly discuss further. Thank you, Sarah. Academic program review. The last thing is a casual meet and greet for new provosts and vice presidents. We're going to do this on October 3rd. Again, we have set a date for. I'll send an email announcement by the end of today. This is really for the new academic and it's senior leadership. It really should be, again, provost and vice president. We know that there's been a lot of change on the campuses, and we haven't really done this since before the pandemic. So this is just kind of a more, again, a casual, it'll be me and Trish Gordon-McCown, just, you know, kind of just doing an introductory, very basic, hello, nice to meet you. MHEC is a friendly, we'd like to think we're a friendly regulatory agency. So we would appreciate any coordination that you can do on that front to get the right people with us, just again, as a hello kind of situation. Okay, on to the next topic, upcoming public meetings. We've got a number of initiatives that are happening before the end of the calendar year. We have a JCR request on increasing participation in post-secondary education. This is a report that we have to do in conjunction with MSCE, and this is increasing participation in post-secondary education for recent high school graduates. So what we're going to do is we're going to do 3 listening sessions. They will be 2 hours long. We've tried to either find lunchtime hours, evening hours, and a morning session so that we can kind of grab everybody. We're targeting high school counselors, but we certainly want higher ed to participate in these listening sessions, whether they are financial aid advisors, academic advisors, whatever it may be. You'll get the announcement for it. We have a targeted agenda, and it really is a listening session. We have about 4 or 5 main questions to ask the group and to get feedback and responses on. So keep an eye out for that. That'll come out in the next day or 2. And again, this will be a joint initiative with MHEC and MSDE. So stay tuned for more on that front. Another upcoming public meeting, as you may know, our commission has a subcommittee on diversity, equity, and inclusion. You will be getting a letter from Secretary Fielder, 2 segments. This will not go to president. This is a to-do for you all as segment leaders to identify DEI campus representatives that are focused on DEI initiatives. Our commissioners want to hear from campuses to learn more about what's happening and what those initiatives look like and what those structures are. So what we'll do is we'll form the work group first and then set a date. So identify the people and then we'll go from that way. This is a slightly different committee in the fact that it is really motivated by our commissioners and that our commissioners are interested in hearing from the campuses. Sarah.
This is extremely timely. MICVA will be convening Chief Diversity Officers tomorrow. So I'd love to talk to them about this, but some quick questions I think they might have is, what is the scope of participation you're looking for from the MICVA institutions in case all 13 want to participate? And again, to your point just recently about the other meeting, what level of a campus representative are you looking for? Are you looking for the Chief Diversity Officer, or are you looking for the president or the program?
Yeah, great question. So we are limiting the conversation. I can't remember what we have drafted, but it's our similar 2 to 3 campus representatives. And then of course you as a segment leader can participate in the discussions as well. To be thoughtful about your campus representation, whether you do small to large campuses, campuses that serve diverse populations, of course, or campuses that are doing really cool initiatives. We leave that up to you as segment. But yeah, we're gonna, because it would be too big of a discussion otherwise. So representation matters, certainly in this discussion. We do want somebody that's doing the work. So yeah, if you have a Chief Diversity Officer, if you have particular roles on the campuses that are specific to diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, those are the people we want to talk to. Yep. So again, you should be seeing that in the next day or 2, that request come through.
Sarah, the purpose of this is the DEI subcommittee of the commissioners started about a year ago, and one of the first things they did was to go through the campus reports that we receive and that are compiled, which are, as you know, exhaustive in terms of pages, and starting to look for commonality. They made some recommendations in terms of changing the actual diversity request report. So this is an effort for them to become a little bit more educated on what it takes, what are the campuses doing, so they can see not just their view, but also the campus view, because I think it's important to have that input. So that's the purpose of it. There's no, look and saying, well, what are you doing? Why not doing this? Hopefully we can get to identification of best practices. That's where this is headed. Okay, go ahead, Emily.
Okay, thank you. The last topic on this, on upcoming public meetings, is a little less formalized, but still something that we want to tackle before the end of the calendar year, is near completer initiatives. As you might know, we have an obligation to do statewide outreach. We have campaign money to do that. And then of course we have the scholarship for near completers. We're realizing probably we're not doing a great job of that work. So we want to gather people and figure out how we can do better, we as an agency, and that may very well include the challenges is we know campuses are doing their own near completer initiatives. And so I think we're butting up against that. So do we tack on to your near completer initiatives instead of us trying to do our own thing? How do we do this more collaboratively so that we are, and the near completers are such a specialized group. They're students that are no longer students. So how do we access them if we don't know what's happened to them necessarily? They could have very well moved out of state and they're done. So I think it merits some discussion and some thoughtful thinking on what we do. And so it's self-serving to our agency so we can better identify how to make this work and how to make our campaigns more targeted and how we expand the scholarship. So more to come on that. That I have is a little less formalized, but as soon as we get more details and figure out what to do on that, again, that will be a to-do for Segment to spread that word and get people to come. That will be a more the merrier discussion, kind of open town hall design. Okay, so those are our upcoming public meetings so that you're aware of them, and particularly before legislative session. Let me go down to the next topic on research collections and products. Again, these are all just FYI so that you're aware of them. Our data book, so we have decided to stop making a printed version of the data book. Instead, we have moved into making dashboards that mirror very much what we have in the design and the information that we share in the data book. But now these are interactive dashboards, which allow the user a lot more usability in terms of filtering and slicing the data, and gives you the data in a more visualized way. There will still be downloadable tables that will look like the data book tables, but they will be part of the dashboard. So we are rolling those out in the next coming weeks, particularly in advance of legislative session. That's what has always been our target, is to get the data book out before session. So we're going to do that. You'll get announcements on those dashboards, but I wanted to make clear that we are moving away from that static data book, paper-based data book. And we're still doing a data book, but it's these interactive dashboards. They're super cool. Secretary Fielder has seen a few of them already. You're on mute, Secretary.
I know. No, I was just talking about Dr. Smertz, Barbara Smertz, and her team has done a great job. And the first one I was looking at and reviewing was enrollment, and how many different slices and different ways you can start to see the enrollment differences, even between segments, when you look at age and gender and things like that, things that you can't really do with a static data book. And so yeah, I think that it's a good step forward.
Brad, Dr. Phillips?
No, I'm excited to see it as well, Mr. Secretary. I was just curious, this is just the data book that you're talking about and not your other annual reports that you put together. Those will still be the same? Okay.
Correct.
Yeah.
For now.
Yeah.
Yep. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to remark that when the questions come up about the enrollment that we use is what's reported by each institution, to the reporting agency. So it's not anything other than representing what is represented to us.
So on that note, we are making some clarifications. These are memos that are going to go to your IR staff, and you should just be aware of them. SAT collection, we collect SAT in two different formats. We collect it in an aggregate form, and then we also collect it in conjunction with an enrollment file. We are getting rid of the aggregate form. It's duplicative. We already collected at the student level. So your IR staff are going to get notification of this. We also recognize that many of the public institutions in particular have moved away from requiring SAT as part of an admissions decision. It still may be required in terms of determining college readiness and other factors, but at least in terms of admission. So we recognize that SAT is becoming a less informative metric across the state, especially with institutional policies shifting. So we're doing away with the aggregate, but we'll continue collecting it at the student level data through an enrollment file. So that's just something for you to be aware of in case you get questions on that. We've also, since the pandemic, and with campuses doing all sorts of different modalities for different courses, we kind of went temporarily with guidance that said we want to know the modality of the course at the time of registration or at the time of the first day of classes. That's going to be our permanent guidance moving forward. We had kind of said this was temporary guidance in light of COVID. That will now be the guidance that we hold for identifying courses that are distance ed. We still maintain it's either fully distance ed or it's fully in person. We're not recognizing high flex courses because that's just a bit of a challenge. Every campus is kind of dealing with those differently. But the point is that we are now moving ahead with a very specific definition, cutoff definition for what we mean with distance ed at the course level. President Wilson.
Hey, Emily, do we have any sense of how many institutions in our state still use the SAT for admissions?
That is a good question. I do not know offhand, but I'm sure we can pull that together fairly quickly if that is something you're interested in knowing.
Yes, only the ones that actually are still using it. Not the actual institutions, but just the number of institutions that are still using it as the primary decision-making tool for admission.
Joe, Dr. Bachman?
Our Board of Regents passed a resolution that, in fact, will allow our 12 campuses to be SAT or ACT optional. And at this point in time, all 12 are remaining optional. College Park and maybe one other are considering, after gathering data for 2 or 3 years, to move back. The Board of Regents, their resolution or the policy change allows each campus to choose. My inclination is that at least 10 of our 12 campuses will remain optional continuously at this point in time, if that's helpful.
Yeah, it is. And so we are optional as well. And it took me a while to kind of get to this space. I chair the National Task Force for the NCAA on whether the NCAA should continue to use standardized tests for student athlete eligibility. It was an 8-month-long process. 20 individuals from across the United States, from Stanford to the Big Ten, all those schools were represented. The bottom line is that, woof, I mean, wow. I think I took a poll of the 20 individuals as we commenced the discussion. It was like 19 of us were going into this discussion saying that standardized tests should continue to be a part of the criteria. At the end of the process, no one was in that space. I don't want to use this space for it, but it was just amazing. All of the top scholars in the country we brought before us. We brought the C-suite senior brass from both the College Board as well as from ACT. It was just a lot to digest in terms of what has happened with these standardized tests over the last 100 years. So I was just curious as to where we were in Harriet and Maryland and thinking about this. I know where we've been for the last couple of years or so, but didn't know where the other institutions were.
Let me ask a follow-up question. Are any of the colleges within the institutions, those that are, say, STEM, engineering, some of those are harder sciences, are they moving optional or are they still requiring? And do they have the option, if their institution is saying it's optional for an individual college within a university, to do that?
So that's a very good question. And we here at Morgan have not approached it with that degree of granularity, but that's a very good question, Secretary Fielder. Right now, we are looking more at high school GPA, ranking class, and also we are developing what we hope will be a national instrument in this space of how you can really ascertain the readiness on the part of African American students and Latinx students in particular for college and to be successful in college. But that is a different type of instrument. And we are well along now. We are in beta testing now. This is the second year, third year. But ETS is well aware of it. They have kind of been in this space with us momentarily. Our thinking is that because of the constructs that we have come up with for this instrument, that it would be applicable across all disciplines. And therefore, there may not be the need to do a test specific for STEM versus the liberal arts versus the performing arts or versus the social sciences.
Thank you. And the reason I was thinking about that question of the granularity, to me, it's very parallel and almost congruent to the question about the AP being a 3 or a 4, with some of the individual colleges within institutions trying to hold to a standard of 3 or better. And that's, again, in the transfer realm, makes it much more difficult to standardize. Well, Emily, I'm getting us off track. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Good discussion. President Wilson, we'll get you a list of institutions that are using SAT for admission practices. Okay, two more updates. Our Maryland approved program collection system. Again, this is a research item. You might be aware this is specific to the teacher pipeline and our programs that are preparing teachers for the workforce. It's a specialized collection just for that, because we know it's hard to sometimes capture the students that are preparing to be teachers. We've realized that we need to expand that collection and make some changes. Again, we'll be talking with your, not only your IR staff on this issue, but we're going to your education deans and directors at the October meeting with some proposed changes so that we can improve this collection and ensure that we can better understand the teacher preparation pipeline into the workforce. It's a big issue. We get lots of questions on it. We want to make sure that the collection is well designed to do that. So just know that we'll be talking with your education deans and directors on this and following up with your IR staff in terms of this specific teacher collection pipeline. And then the last item is a best practices survey. This is something that we are going to send directly to your president. As you all know, we have the 55% completion goal that by 2025, 55% of Marylanders have at least an associate's degree. We want to better capture what the campuses are doing in terms of best practices and what are evidence-based initiatives to, and this is really focused on completion, making sure that students have the resources to finish out their program of study. So we're going to be sending a survey to your president, so you don't need to do anything other than nudge them, but you'll get copied on this communication. And it's really a survey in the truest form. What kind of initiatives do you have on your campus? How do you know they're working? And that's really the thing we're most interested in knowing. How do they know it's working? What evidence do they have? What have they tried and they know it doesn't work? What resources are available? So again, that should be going out in the next week or two. We have a draft of it. And we're just finalizing it. So just be aware that that's a survey that will help inform our best practices report that we do every year on the 55% completion goal. I don't know who was first, if it was Jeff or Sarah.
I'll jump in. So these questions are similar to what we had to put in for the budget that's going in next week, because they asked virtually the same questions as to, you know, kind of evidence-based initiatives on success. So there were 3, give the 3 that you're most successful in your segment, and then 2 that have been removed.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So these are a little bit more specific in the sense of like, we're asking things like, do you have a child care center? Do you have a food pantry? Do you provide transportation resources? Those kinds of things. And in some ways getting like those set of questions, how do you prevent dropout? We also have a set of questions on advising and what's the best way to advise students so that they enroll in the next semester and finish out a program of study. So we are a bit more targeted in the question. Sarah.
Yeah, so thanks for giving us a heads up about this. So I just wanted to ask, what kind of narrative are you going to have narrative with these questions? Because one of the things that we're seeing happen on our campuses is that the 55% completion goal is a number. And so as enrollment declines, we have less individuals to literally produce less degrees. And we thought about kind of walking the path of asking to change our targets. And we're not going there. It sounds complicated and everyone's experiencing the same kind of attrition. But I was curious if you will set up, because this is a MICUA specific problem, but DLS noticed that we didn't hit our targets and that we haven't hit our targets, and it impacted their recommendations relating to Selinger funding. And so I just think that some of the MICUA presidents, I don't want to speak for them, but I just want to give you a heads up. If this goes directly to them without some context, they're going to be nervous about answering, because it looks like something that if you don't answer well, you could get penalized for. And we saw that already. So I will nudge them as much as I can. I just wanted you to know that going directly to them on this one actually is one that you might not get a good response.
That is helpful feedback. We hadn't thought of that. So let me think on how we frame that so that it will be optional. We've already have it set up as an optional response, but I wouldn't want campuses to feel like this is going to be used as anything more than just sharing successes. This isn't about sharing. If there's any failures, it would be purposeful. We wouldn't be outing any one particular institution necessarily. But that's helpful that we frame it in a way that there's some comfort there in how this information is being used.
Was anyone experiencing Sarah going in and out when she was talking?
Yes.
Yes. So Sarah, you may want to check your connection or your system soon. Sorry, go ahead.
Emily, this is Joe. I just wanted to make sure that you make it as clear as possible, understanding just how complicated a set of questions you're asking. And I will simply use Towson as an example. With 20,000+ students, between a third and a half of them are transfer students, and what works in the School of Health Sciences might not work at all in the School of Education versus transfer students versus the performing arts. And so to ask the presidents to explain what you're doing is an incredibly complicated and in-depth kind of question. So try to be, I'm just urging you to try and be as clear as possible in what it is you're asking. I think any one of us could sit down and write, whether you call it intrusive advising, early advising, heads up advising, that's a best practice no matter what. But any of us could write that down right now. So to be more specific or as specific as possible as to what you're after, I think would be very helpful to the campuses.
Will do. Yeah, I think we are struggling with probably the same thing all the campuses are struggling with when the legislature comes back and says, what can we be doing? Where should we be putting that's a really hard question to answer. We are struggling to find ways to package that in a way that's meaningful. So this has been great feedback. We'll figure out how to frame this in a way that does all the things that was just said. Okay, we'll stay tuned for more on that front so that we can keep that ball moving. I think that's it for me. There is one thing that is not on the agenda. It's this mission statement review. We don't have any, I'm not ready to provide any public plans on that yet. I know for the public institutions, this is something that we do after the state plan has been released. President Wilson, this is something that we are interested, this is a recommendation that came from the NCHEMS report that we are kind of mulling over. This idea of the difference between an institutional mission that really is just what the institution does versus an operational mission statement, and kind of but we haven't really figured out what that means or how to capture that. So we're still trying to figure out how to make that mission statement review meaningful for our agency and meaningful for the institutions too, in the exercise of ensuring that our campuses, our public institutions in particular, really express the diversity and the programs that are offered, the scholarship that is done, the initiatives that are happening on the campus. So we've got to figure that out. So more to come on mission statement. We're just not there yet. As soon as we kind of have more detailed discussions on that, we'll follow up with you. And I am done, officially done. I apologize. I know that was a lot of updates, but I appreciate you all listening and the discussion. Thank you.
Oh, come on, Emily. You always have just one more. We'll get to that, I'm sure, a little later. Okay. Jeff and Al, you want to provide the update on the OSPA?
Sure. Secretary Fielder introduced Al Dorsett, our new director of the Office of Student Financial Assistance. We're very excited to have him join us. He's been working very hard to quickly get up to speed. So I'll turn it over to Al.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Secretary Fielder. Good morning, everyone. So within the about month time frame, just to give you an update, I believe Ms. Donna Thomas, my predecessor, previously gave an update on 2 bills that were passed during the 2022 legislative session. She highlighted several changes effective July 1st that resulted from the passage of House Bill 734 of higher education student financial assistance, as well as House Bill 1030. So still meeting with legal and my department or determining how that really is going to make an impact, not so much with House Bill 734, because I believe it just updates eligibility and will update our webpage and other documents to reflect that, but more so House Bill 1030, where I previously had a meeting with legal already. So we're looking to identify those dates so they don't impact the student as much, but at the same point in time, knowing that we need the time to process, especially with the GA grant, how students' eligibility is finalized based off the students providing their documentation. So in order to have the time to get, what could be 5,000, 10,000 plus different documents and verify those documents and make sure students that have been identified eligible are really eligible. Looking at adjusting those dates, but hopefully not to have a large impact on those students. This hasn't been discussed with the FAAC Council yet because they've been focused on the Chapter 577 at this point in time, but I plan to have this on our next October agenda to talk with them, as well as put out some documentation to all schools latest November.
Okay, any questions for Al? Sarah?
This isn't a question, but Al, hi, nice to meet you. I know you've interacted with some of the MICUA team. Thank you so much for your help. I did want to mention, if everyone is not aware, that the Office of Program Evaluation is doing a study of OSPA. Are you guys all aware of that? Okay, and so we met with them and we suggested that perhaps they would want to meet with you, Al, if they haven't already, and get in front of FAC and perhaps talk to the financial aid folks on that committee directly. So this is really just a heads up. We're not involved in it. We just talked to them, but wanted you to know.
Yes, they've been interviewing us extensively.
Just for everybody's update, is we're still waiting for fall enrollment reports on some of our scholarships. We do know that the delegate and senatorial scholarships, it looks like we're going to have another large carryover. So if you have any students and contacts that are, looking for scholarships, make sure you mention that to them. Also, I know Al was trying to get the data together on the Promise Scholarship and the Teaching Fellow Scholarship, especially because, again, we had large appropriations there that remained unused. And it's difficult to explain to the legislature that, we could carry over scholarships, even though we're awarding, 120 million or so each year. So, but I want to thank you all. Okay, let's move into member updates. Dr. Bird, you want to start us off?
Sure. It's been an exciting beginning of the semester around here at St. Mary's. We opened this week our brand new performing arts building with our new 700-seat concert hall. It's going to be beautiful. Have a full weekend for opening it this coming weekend. And along with that, we also have a Learning Commons building, which is right next to it, that is opening for our Ed Studies faculty with a set of learning spaces in the first floor. So it's an exciting time in the middle of campus. If you've ever been here, it's where our old game field used to be. So it takes over the middle of campus. And that's it for us.
Okay, good. It's too early to know on how is the enrollment looking.
We had extremely successful for us. One of the largest entering classes in the past 10 years, our most diverse class entering ever. So it's been exciting for us.
Great, thank you. Dr. Wilson, Morgan.
But housing challenges.
Oh, yes. Well, you've got bumper crops of students and looking for places to live, right?
Yeah, we just literally don't have space to house the students that want to come to Morgan. We are looking at possibly 10,000 students here at Morgan, which of course our enrollment now is the largest in our 155-year history. The last 2 years, the freshman enrollment has been the largest in our history. And quite frankly, the applications, we had to close down our application portal 2 months early because there was no use for us to go on and accept all the applications from students who want to come when we didn't have any place to put them. And so we did open a 670-bed new residential facility a month ago. We're going forward to build a twin tower there, hopefully open it in 2024. But I tell you, the inflation challenges are enormous. What we thought that we could do in terms of building that new tower is now increased by like 25%. And given the supply chain issues, it's just tough. So that's sort of where we are now, is trying to think through, at least in the next 4 or 5 years, how large of a university do we really want to be, and then whether we might even want to study a cap on our enrollment for a while. But those discussions we're having here with a high degree of intention. We're very excited about our progression toward R1 status, very high research status. I have been asked by Ted Mitchell, president of ACE, to be a part of a critical, thoughtful group, he says. I think it was about 12 leaders in higher ed to kind of meet over the next year or so and kind of rethink this Carnegie classification, what should be in it, what should not be in it, what matters, what does not matter. So we're very, very pleased that we'll have a voice in whatever is going to come out of that in 2024 going forward. And then finally, on Wednesday, I'm headed out to the Monterey Jazz Festival. I'll only be out there for a couple of days or so, but our university choir and our university jazz band have been invited to actually perform on several stages out there. They're very excited, and so I'm always excited when the students are excited. That's it.
Okay, Dr. Wilson, I want to add one to your list for you to explain. I noted, I think all of us have the moving forward of the doctorate in osteopathic medicine in terms of signing of the lease, and I think it would be good to update us on that. I know we've just received the stage 1 application, but that's a tremendous step forward in terms of HBCU, East of the Mississippi, and so forth, and gives you a soapbox.
Yeah, well, we're very excited. We've been at this for about 4 years. The pandemic slowed it down a little bit. But the Board of Public Works did approve the ground lease for, this is a private entity, to basically start the work to raise the old Montebello Hospital complex on the campus. And they'll build a new building to house the Maryland College of Osteopathic Medicine at Morgan State University. The intent is to enroll the first class in 2024. As you indicated, Secretary Fielder, this is the first time that a medical school have been placed on the campus of an HBCU in nearly 50 years. The last one, of course, being the Morehouse School of Medicine. One of the attractive things about this for us was the extreme paucity of Blacks in medical school, period. And when you look at Black males, they're almost an endangered species. I wasn't paying much attention, but when I looked at, someone showed me the number of Black students in medical school in the 1970s, if you will, Black males was about 570. When we looked at it about 4 or 5 years ago, it was like 565. And so within whatever 40, 50 years, we haven't made any significant progress in this space. And so we see an opportunity here to train primary care physicians who will go into urban spaces, go into marginalized communities, and provide primary care. So we're very excited.
Okay, thank you. Any questions? I should ask any questions for Dr. Bird or Dr. Wilson. Okay, why don't we move over to the community colleges, which just received a national ranking at the top. Hey, Brad.
Thanks for the plug, Secretary. Yes, ranked number 2, community college system. So we're obviously very pleased about that. And thanks for the recognition from the governor and your office and Commerce. The word's been getting out, so it's been nice to get the feedback. I don't have much to say as far as an update. Our enrollment is a mixed bag. Some are up, some are down. Populations within our institutions, such as dual enrollment, tend to be growing exponentially, and I'll come back to that. We're finding that we have tremendous a push from employers to find skilled laborers. And our competition happens to be in this crazy economy with jobs that are paying $40 an hour to unload warehouses and things like that. And if you're a 17-year-old kid or an 18-year-old kid, you're going to take the $40 an hour versus college. And we heard from just Friday, the Maryland Tech Council begging for more students with some type of licensure or certification just to do some of the high-tech jobs. It's a neat phenomenon. All the research and development in biotech in our state for a long time has become commercialized as a result of some of the pandemic advancements. And they don't need that higher degree level to do the work. They need a workforce to commercialize that research and development. And we have to figure out a way to attract more students. And I think the economy as it is now, we're wrestling in certain sections of the state to get those people back because of the ability for them to get a $40 hour job. That said, dual enrollment is continuing to grow, and some of our colleges, it's over 20% of our enrollment. And that's my one question back to you, Mr. Secretary, is we wrote you on ways to expand or some questions that we had around students that are seeking dual enrollment opportunities and continuing education courses, a series of courses leading to licensure or certification. And I'm just hoping you got the letter. We're anxiously waiting to get a response, sort of realign Comar with statute.
No, we did receive the letter, and I think it also included a question about the gifted and talented potential funding. And Jeff Newman is researching both of those with legal staff, so we are working on that for getting an answer of what needs to change on that.
Okay.
Okay. Any questions for Brad? Sarah from MICUA?
So hopefully you can hear me. Jeff, thanks for letting me know. I apologize about my sound. Our start of the semester is going well enough. We, similar to it sounds like some of the rest of you, have some schools that have their largest, most diverse classes this fall, and some that are not. The big news in MICUA land, as most of you have seen, is that Notre Dame is going to be admitting men next fall. So I know that the president and the board are super excited about this. The alumni have been a little bit divided. So if you want to read more on that, you can find it online. But we're excited for them. This represents a path forward that is a couple years in the planning. They had a task force look at it. They've seen great success with other institutions that have gone this way. The other thing that we're really working on right now, and it's again unique to MICUA, but the legislature has required us to submit a JCR by November 1st. And so this has really required our campuses to dig deep in terms of how we use our Salinger funding. And I've asked our schools to talk not only about how they use their Salinger funding, but how they use other funds on campus to hit the priorities that are in the state plan, and that, you know, increase enrollment of minority communities, low income students, first generation students, churn out workforce. Specifically, they asked about STEM, nurses and teachers, and close the achievement gaps. So we're excited about the possibility for that report. We will share it with all of you when it is completed. And that's all. I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, any questions for Sarah at MICUA?
Sarah,
Okay,
I'm so sorry. You went in and out on your announcement about Notre Dame. What? I'm sorry I missed that.
I'm sorry. So Notre Dame is going to be admitting men in the fall of 23, which has been in the news. And so we are excited about that. And the president and the board are very excited. It's about 4 years in the making. They set up a task force to look at this, and they're taking courage from other institutions that have done this and have charted a productive path forward.
Okay, any other questions for Sarah? Let's move on to the university system. Dr. Bachman?
Thank you. It is a great fall for our 12 institutions. We have welcomed 2 new presidents over the summer at Salisbury and at UMBC, both going well. I won't give you the 12-minute report that the chancellor gave to the regents on Friday with all of the accolades that our 12 campuses have received. I would be happy to share that if anybody would be interested in it. Working with our community college partners, we have some of our campuses that indeed also have their largest freshman classes ever. We are down in transfers as a result, I think, of the challenges being faced by our community college colleagues. But in fact, I would like to emphasize that we too are looking very seriously at dual enrollment, but also dual admission with our community college partners. And there are some of those dual admission, dual enrollment programs that are starting, we think, to work very well. And we think it's going to help both of our segments moving forward. And we're really pleased about that partnership. I won't bore you with all of the other challenges and accolades that we have, but I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody might have.
Any questions? Okay, great. One of the things that the dashboards pointed out for me back on the enrollment is the state as a whole has now moved to be majority minority. So when we start taking a look at the big picture here, as a state, we're pretty much, I don't think there's a national ranking for this. There's a national ranking for the best of each of so many different categories, which is a whole different classification. But in terms of where we are in trying to meet the needs of our citizens, I think we've made some great strides, especially in the last decade, 2 decades. Joe, please go ahead.
I was going to say our system has been majority minority in this for the students for the last I'm not sure how many years. We're also proud that 7 of our 12 presidents are in
Yes.
fact African American. But our challenge is with our faculty. But we have some really terrific programming going on with a project in the lead with 4 other systems across the country. To in fact diversify the faculty in comparing some models between California and Maryland. We have Texas A&M, and North Carolina systems working with us.
Thank you for that. And I do know that in terms of the administrative staff, it's a little easier to move toward, maybe easier is not the right word, in terms of the turnover of staff and not dealing with the tenure tracks. It can happen a little bit more rapidly. So we've been trying to watch that and encourage whatever institutions can do at establishing internships and grad assistantships, and specifically diversifying our staff and faculty. So thank you all for that. That's big progress. Anyone have any other comments as we close out here?
I have just a statement about what's happening within the state. You know, the state of Maryland historically has had a pretty high % of degree attainment after high school statewide. But we've been paying a lot of attention to these demographics now over at least the last 8 to 10 years. And we kind of predicted to the legislature that this is really what is coming. And therefore, our strategy has to be one where we are looking at the pockets of degree attainment in Maryland that will present the greatest challenges to the entire state going forward. If, for example, we're not targeting those pockets. And so, Secretary Phil, I hope that when we start the discussion around the next state higher ed plan, that we really delve deeper into these pockets. So, you know, the legislature has designated Morgan as its, quote, preeminent public urban research institution. We have an obligation to Baltimore City, with all due respect, unlike Hopkins, unlike the University of Maryland, Baltimore. And what I've said to our board is that the future of Baltimore City is tied more to Morgan than it is to any other institution. And we have to get in there and look at degree attainment with regard to Baltimore City residents. And I mean, our overarching goal here has to be to bring that degree attainment to a level minimally that is equal with the rest of the state. Otherwise, we're going to be talking about all of the major challenges facing the largest city in Maryland for a long, long time if we don't do that. So just wanted to kind of put that out there, that we have some wonderful, wonderful places in our state that have the highest baccalaureate degree attainment, associate degree attainment in the nation. And then we have some pockets that are really, really huge that present us with the greatest challenges, and we cannot ignore those challenges.
Yeah, sir, I would agree with you, but I would add that it's going to take all of the institutions in Baltimore to raise Baltimore. And while you may state that Morgan more than any others, the Hopkins, Maryland, in terms of the students that go on for a PhD that are a minority, are still the largest. So we need all institutions working together in a collaborative nature to move this forward. We really do need to examine exactly what you're talking about. The pockets of unemployment and problems are tied directly to low educational achievement. So we have to work with MSDE and Baltimore City schools and all of those schools to figure out what can we do to help lift this. And I appreciate your continued leadership in this area, that we really have to move this forward. I think I saw Joe had a hand up for a second.
Well, Secretary, if I can just also add, and I'm sure you are all aware of this, but it's worth just saying out loud that, you know, our biggest growing population over the next 5 to 10 years is our Hispanic population. And campuses really should be thinking about that, how you're going to access those populations, how you're going to leverage their expertise. These are often individuals who are dual language learners. And we could really use those individuals in our K through 12 system. We could really use those individuals in a variety of, so I think targeting also up and coming populations may also be something on the radar as well. Certainly we need to serve the populations we have today, and Baltimore City is a great example of that. But also forward thinking about growing populations that we know are going to be increasing in the state, and preventing further equity gaps among those demographics.
Okay, any other comments? Can I have a motion to adjourn then? We'll see you at the next meeting.
Motion to
Looks like
adjourn.
we have acclamation. Thank you all. Be safe out there.
Thank you.
Good luck to
Bye.
each of you. Bye-bye.
Emily?
Yes.
Can you stay on for 1 minute so I can see if I can call in?
Sure. Well, it's still recording. Do you want to just call me?
The problem is that I don't know how to use Google Meet, and I think it's a Google Meet problem. So do you want to set up a new link some other time this week? I'm worried about the commission meeting.
Oh, I see. Okay.
I don't know if that's perfect. So it doesn't have to be you. Maybe if you're IT person or someone could just set up a test Google Meet link with me sometime this week, so that, because I don't want to come in and out during the commission meeting.
You got it. No
okay.
problem.
Thanks, Emily. Okay.
Yep. I'll see what I can do.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.